digital has taken over in every area.
Lexie, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. As the Director of Strategic Marketing for the Houston Dynamo, I think you're a fantastic guest. All of my students, of course, are local in Houston, and they get really excited when we were able to connect with marketers who are part of our professional sports organizations. So first, I just want to thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And I know when you work in professional sports, your job is always on. So I know that your time is very valuable, and I just appreciate you being here. I want to start things off because it is such a cool field. It's such a cool organization to work for. You're working for an MLS team. It seems like very aspirational for people studying marketing if they're interested in sports to reach that level of working for a professional team. So how did you get into sports marketing? Why did you choose sports marketing instead of just marketing or another business discipline? And then if you could kind of talk about what your career trajectory has looked like. I know you started in Indiana and then you've kind of moved your way around until you ended up here in Houston, but just give us a little bit of background.
Sure. So I'm originally from Indianapolis, and I went to school at Indiana University, and I was studying marketing in the Kelley School of Business. And during my time, actually in my sorority, we did a philanthropy event with IU baseball. And so I worked very closely with the athletic directors and the marketing department within the college athletics there at IU, and just fell in love with, promoting specifically sports and giving back and using it as a platform for good. And at that point, I just started exploring different career paths with my marketing degree, and sports marketing is actually a really big program in Bloomington. So I ended up switching my major at that point as a sophomore, I believe. And I just figured that was, exactly what I wanted to do. And it still had all of the business elements to it, but it just was a lot more focused on that. So then my junior and senior years, I started looking into internships, and that led me to my first internship with the Indiana Pacers. It was in their community relations department. And for those of you who aren't familiar, it's basically the charitable arm. Most professional sports teams, are really committed to giving back to their local community. So obviously being from Indiana and that being my hometown team, that was kind of a dream come true. And it really gave me my first exposure into what it was actually like day to day to work at a professional sports organization. So I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So that led me to my other internship opportunities. So after graduating, I joined USA Diving, which is an Olympic sport, and that particular headquarters is in Indianapolis. And I did marketing and events with them for a summer, and then that led to an internship opportunity with the Indianapolis Colts for a season. And then as a graduate, I joined the Atlanta Braves organization. So I spent about 11 months there in community affairs and marketing. And then I got my first full-time offer from the Dallas Mavericks. And I was the coordinator of corporate communications and community relations. So it was a nice blend of PR and CR, which is community. And during my time with the Mavs, I had a lot of, overlap with the marketing department, and transitioned into more of a general marketing role there, and spent 2 seasons in the marketing role, and then relocated to Houston and began this job with the Dynamo and Dash. And so soccer is new to me, still relatively new, but it's been a lot of hopping, and every, position of mine has led to the next one. And I've been fortunate to have exposure into 3 or 4 different areas of the marketing department, which I think has lended, me to doing this role.
Right. Wow. That's quite a path. For being pretty early in your career, you've worked for a lot of cool organizations. And I can't help but notice you've worked for every professional sports league, major league, except for the NHL. Is that right?
Except for hockey. I know.
Yeah.
I got to get the cycle. I need to get hockey at some point in my career.
We know what's next, I guess, right?
If anyone's listening.
Right. The Dallas Stars will be calling after the interview. So since you have had exposure to all these different leagues, I know a lot of your knowledge in sports marketing is generalizable, but particularly working with the MLS, which is a little bit smaller, but growing a lot faster than some of the other leagues. Are there any differences? How does that, I know there are differences, but are there any that like really affect you as a marketer? Do you do more, different tactics, kind of organic marketing with MLS than you did for the NFL, for example?
Yeah, I think the two major differences are that soccer is on a global level, especially you just mentioned NFL. That's obviously a very Americanized sport, and it's the big dog right now within athletics here in the States. And then even though MLS is the fastest growing sports league in America, it also has a huge international following. So we're kind of the new kid on the block here in the States, but everywhere else, soccer is a big deal. So I think from the two major differences that I see, budgets are a little bit more constrained here, just obviously with being a younger league and needing to just be prudent in our business operations and make sure that we're growing to scale and being responsible fiscally. That's been a big transition. And then just the target audience, I think, is still developing. With it being such a younger skewed crowd, it's changing every day. The different feedback we're getting from our fans, the different groups, it's a lot tougher, I think, to segment who we're going after. And there's a lot of differing opinions within the soccer world on, do we go after people who love, international soccer, or do we focus on the youth movement that really has only known American soccer? How do you blend the two? How do you blend them? When do you blend them? When do you keep them separate? So I think that's, for a marketer, that's the most difficult thing, is that you've got everyone in the world who is potentially a soccer fan, but you can't speak to them all the same way.
Right. That's really cool. It's a big problem, but it's an interesting one. And it's a problem that relates to your growth, right? Because
Right.
It's almost as though you have too many opportunities to grow, and you're really just trying to get a little bit more granular and figure out, do I want to go after a market in Mexico, or do I want to focus on kids in Houston? And I'm sure you're doing both, but you're going to handle those marketing efforts a little bit differently. How has that international audience affected your target markets? Is it only Mexico really that you target, or how does that work?
We try to be open on it. We're in an interesting position where we also operate BBVA Compass Stadium, and so we host a lot of international events at our venue. So naturally we're tying into a lot of different nationalities and cultures as different events come through, and we'd be remiss to avoid that as an opportunity to cross promote the Dynamo and the Dash. It also depends a lot year to year on based on the makeup of our roster. I think last year we had, on the Dynamo side, if I'm not mistaken, 12 different countries represented. So that has a lot to do with how we message people and where we're going. It is predominantly Mexican fans that tend to come out to our games as far as the demographics go on paper. But it's not something that we feel comfortable, honing in only on one country. Our head coach, Wilmer, is Colombian. And so, for us, that's important to tap into that. We have really notable Honduran players, and we've actually seen tremendous growth locally with that community, as well as over, internationally. They're one of our top most engaged and interactive fan bases. So, it's really changing. It's really in flex. But just based on the makeup of our location and our city, Mexican soccer fans are a big priority for us.
Okay, good. And I'm glad you mentioned that the players' country of origin can have an effect on your fan base, because I always thought that was kind of cool with Yao Ming and the Rockets. So now with such an international sport, if you're drawing players from all over the world, then you have to be aware of where the players are coming from, and then how you might market to that home country.
Exactly.
That's a really neat dynamic, I think. Now, let's suppose you've kind of and you do this, but you've refined your target markets and you've kind of figured out that, hey, we want to send some kind of messaging to this market, whether it's the youth in Texas, or adults in Mexico, or fans of a particular player in Honduras. How do you go about crafting a message? What's your strategy? How do you make an appeal to someone who's not yet a fan?
Yeah, so we start honing in. We definitely want to hit Houstonians first. So there is a lot of crossover internationally with such a culturally diverse city. But I think first and foremost, we need to figure out, what is our goal with the message, and, what's the end game there? Are we asking them to come to their first game? Have they come to a game before and they haven't engaged with us in a long while? In the international area, are they English speaking? Do we need to communicate with them in their native tongue? Or, can we speak to them in English and it's, that's more comfortable? And so I think it's just figuring out why we're talking to this group, what our message is based on the goals that we're looking to achieve. So a lot of it is just tracking where they are within, their fandom. And then I think it's just important to treat every segment as individually as possible. For instance, with a Hispanic market, we may send more of a family-friendly offer that's a lot more inclusive at the beginning, so that it's more of a community-minded thing. Whereas youth soccer, it might be something that's a little bit more catered to a suburban family that's playing club soccer and has a very, very different experience within the soccer world. And then beyond that, there are sports fans, which we typically like to target, and we try to draw them in to experience soccer for the first time. And so we would speak to them incredibly differently than someone who identifies as a soccer fan first and foremost. It's things like saying game versus match or field versus pitch. There's like very simple language differences that we can't assume, a 40-year-old football fan would necessarily identify with. So it's complicated, but I think it just depends. A lot of times for us, it's just come out to a game, because we feel confident that if you come and experience it, that's going to be the best marketing that we could possibly give someone, is the experience of a game. And our prices are affordable, and the atmosphere is not like anything else in Houston. Houston's, sports identity. And so for us, it's come to a game or come to an event, and then just learn more about it, learn more about soccer, the sport, the team. And then we also tie very, very heavily into Houston pride. Even for the international fans, it's interesting because in American sports, it's traditional to have one team. Maybe you'll see a little bit of difference between pro and college. You can support both. In soccer, you can definitely have, an international team and then an MLS team. So we also try to really heavily message that one does not exclude the other.
Okay. Yeah, that's really cool. I'm happy that you went where you did with the messaging and how different it can be depending on which segment you're going after.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in marketing, we talk a lot in terms of launching new products. We talk about compatibility. And if it's something that's kind of radically different, you have to speak about that product in terms that are consistent with the worldview of that customer. So things you said like football versus soccer, match versus game. That's really cool that you have to be mindful of that for your audience. I guess that's for your general sports audience, right?
Correct.
You would say soccer and match and field, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or no, soccer, game, and field.
For a general sports fan, yes. And then for more of a soccer savvy fan, it would change to football, pitch,
right.
match.
So for channel selection, so where you're going to send these messages, with that general sports fan, mm-hmm. and if you're comfortable sharing, are you able to do things like on Facebook? The Houston Texans have a huge following. So mm-hmm. Can you buy ads and target fans of the Houston Texans page? Is that similar to the kind of things that you do to
We can. You definitely can do that. Specifically on Facebook, that's kind of the holy grail of being able to segment, because fans are self-identifying. And so that's the most valuable insight that we could possibly get. Any marketer should know that surveying is important, but it's obviously the data is only as good as the people participating. And with Facebook having such a grasp on so many people, and it's kind of scary sometimes, the level to which they share their personal information, but it's a marketer's dream because then we can go and find overlaps. So there have been times where we have cross-promoted to different, different sports target audiences and things like that. And it's not always the obvious ones. We'll find trends within our demographics that show that, this one group might be more interested in minor league baseball because they're coming more for the experience or the price point. And so when we're having more of a promo item or special offer, we may go more to the family crowd and the things that they're looking for. We typically see a lot of really good results when we have a specific theme outside of just the soccer game. So for instance, we've done a Star Wars night the last couple years, and we can go on Facebook or many other platforms and see who's identifying as a Star Wars fan. And that's one of the ways that we really try to capture someone who may not have otherwise been tempted to try a soccer game. And then we have seen tremendous results in, they come for the Star Wars, and then they end up coming back and buying a few other games because they really just enjoyed themselves and had a great time. So that's best case scenario. We do that a little bit with other sports teams. And a lot of times it's just behavioral or other interests or things like that. We also do a lot of targeting based on area. So if we know that there's a weeknight game, we'll do a lot more targeting toward the downtown crowd because it's a little bit easier for them to get there than the family crowd that may be having to go home and pick up the kids and then come right back downtown. So there's a lot of ways that you can go. Facebook provides the most flexibility, but there are other avenues that we like to look into. We do a lot of our own scrubbing and email offers with, segmenting through our own CRM system. And then a big thing because of the international crowd, we also, this is actually more of an NBA model, but we do a lot of targeting based on the players that are coming to town. So if there's a Kaká coming, we can see based on the fan profiles if someone is a Kaká fan. It's not ideal. We'd obviously love to get to a point where people are coming because they're Houston Dynamo fans or they're, a fan of people on here in our roster. And a lot of times, it's just the thing that puts them over the edge and makes them act now. So we do a lot of that as well.
That's good. And don't feel bad about it because the Astros aren't shy about hosting the Yankees or the Cubs.
Exactly. And everybody does that, right? And rivalries, everybody loves rivalries. And when LeBron James comes to town and all of these things. So we do. It's very interesting because we do see a big spike for potential matches and matchups with different players. But we're kind of across the board, and it's really just dependent on. A lot of our main factors are day, date, time, the team that's coming into town, the players that are coming into town, and then the special promotions that we have game by game.
And how far in advance do you have that information so that you can start putting together campaigns?
So our schedule got released by MLS, I believe, January 4th. And on January 5th, we had a meeting to go through what are these key, moments within our season and who are our key demographics to reach with those. So we actually just launched our partial plans, our mini plans, and with those in mind. So we're highlighting, the different matches that are coming, the different players that are coming. We have actually a very holiday heavy schedule this year, which is great. We've got games around Cinco de Mayo, Memorial Day weekend, 4th of July. So, people are looking for things to do. So a lot of times it's just their availability and they're looking to spend entertainment dollars and we want to be their choice.
Right. And you mentioned the promotions like Star Wars Night that you run. Do you use those to smooth demand so that if you think there's a game that's going to be in low demand, then that's when you'll kind of place the promotion? I'm just curious how you use that.
And we're definitely smart about where we put them. If we think that a game can carry itself, then there's no reason to put, a special promotion on that night. At the same time, we try to be strategic about when to put it. So, for instance, the last couple of years, we've announced when our Star Wars night is around May the 4th because it's a newsworthy, May the 4th be with you holiday. So some of it is, some of it is timing based on what makes sense. There are definitely promotions that we'll put on a weeknight because it's a weeknight, a weekend because we're targeting families. But yes, the goal of a special promotion is to drive interest that wouldn't otherwise be there.
Right, right. And have you learned a lot from minor league baseball, because they're kind of known for, bizarre promotions and things that get fans into the stadium who aren't necessarily at first that interested in the game?
100%. I mean, I think, I'm a big believer in you can learn from anywhere, not just sports examples. Theaters do it, like Hobby Center, movie theaters do different things. If you dive deep enough, it's interesting. Like, when does a movie premiere? Everybody uses some sort of strategy. So I think you kind of, as a marketer, have to be looking at best practices, not just within the sports world. You have to be looking at entertainment as a whole. Is very relevant to our industry. But beyond that, there are corporations that do a lot of promotions around seasonal launches. Black Friday, you'll see a lot of great content with retailers. And so for us, it's just what makes sense for the cyclical nature of our business. We're in a tough place schedule-wise. Most people don't realize this. I did not realize this until I worked my first season, but MLS season goes from March until October. So we are the longest, running season. Even though baseball has significantly more games, from a time standpoint, we have to remain relevant for the longest period of the calendar year. And we have the shortest off season to plan. So for us, it is good to think about it like minor league baseball. How do you keep people's interest, over such a long season when it might not be the easiest product to sell? But we do try to be cognizant of the fact that we are a professional organization. We don't want to turn into, this crazy discounted, wacky promo type of business. So it's a blend of what relates to our fans and what's taking it a little bit too far.
Right. I think Star Wars Night's on the more sophisticated end of that type of promotion. So I think I see what you're getting at. Some of the minor league teams just go absolutely crazy with their promotions. So no, that's really cool. And I was thinking when you were talking about kind of you're trying to increase the customer's willingness to try the product, even if that interest isn't really strong. And one local example that I think is cool is the Houston Zoo with their zoo lights. And I know all the big zoos are doing this now across the country, but it's even personally, I never think about going to the zoo to see animals, but around the holidays, I want to see the lights. And I live in a really small neighborhood and I don't get to see them. So I go to zoo lights, and then we ended up buying an annual pass. So maybe you have kind of the same thing. Like I go to Star Wars Night, and then I end up buying season tickets for the Dynamo because I have so much fun at the game. And season tickets must be a lot more reasonable, right? And the Houston Texans have a waiting list. So if a sports fan really wants to have that enduring commitment to a local team, then the Dynamo provide an excellent opportunity for that. Exactly.
And with our schedule, the nice thing is our games are pretty spaced out. So we only have 17 home games, but it's, on average, it's 2 a month. It's not 81 home games a year. It's not 41 home games a year. It's very, very manageable. It's very affordable. And it's, it's a really different experience. You're not going to get that with any of the other, major teams in town. But your Zoo Lights example is spot on because it's something that they have placed during non-peak season and, drives a lot of attendance during a holiday that normally the zoo would be irrelevant. And no one would think to do that without that type of promotion. So that's exactly what we're trying to create is, you'll see a different experience in the summer than you would during a home opener or a fall game.
Right. Yeah, that's very cool. And do you have is there a favorite campaign that you've run since you got to the Houston Dynamo, or even one that you ran with one of the other organizations that you worked with? Something you're proud of and that kind of says something about who you are as a marketer?
Well, I'll start with a Dynamo example. My favorite Dynamo example was actually really quickly after I joined the team. We were launching a black jersey for the first time in the club's history, and our tagline is Forever Orange. So it's interesting that we rolled out a color other than orange. And so we did what we referred to as the Paint It Black jersey. We did a Paint It Black campaign, and we launched it with a local graffiti artist, Gonzo, and he did a graffiti mural here in Edo. And it was really, really cool because we were very intent on keeping it local, keeping the focus on the fact that we are downtown Houston, but as opposed to the other teams, we are east downtown. And I mean, there's a very visible difference. You start to get into the graffiti neighborhood and it's a little bit edgier, and, you know, we play out in the heat and we think that we're a little bit of a grittier brand. And we wanted to make sure that it felt very local, both to Houston and to Edo. It was not a traditional way to launch a jersey, to just see a massive mural come up with a player wearing it. But it was really great because, you know, it definitely incorporated as a brand how we wanted to present ourselves. We tied in our jersey partner at the time. They literally had a graffiti billboard of, you know, their sponsorship on the logo. It was definitely a different and interesting PR pitch to get news cameras to come out and cover a painting as opposed to a runway show or, you know, a digital photo gallery or something along those lines. And then we did a lot that whole season to promote when the team would be wearing black, and we had a ticket offer tied into it. So I think it was just a very well integrated campaign. That was a fresh take on something that happens every single year, but I feel like we kind of knocked it out of the park, and it seemed like our fans responded, and you know, it became a destination for them to go and take photos and engage exactly how you hope fans engage with your brand. So that would be my Dynamo example. And then when I was with the Mavs, I was still on the community relations side, and they have a fundraiser called North Texas Giving Day, which is like, you know, one day giving campaign, and there's different matches and things like that. And if you remember the Geico commercial where they said, you know, guess what day it is? It's hump day. We did a take on that with Dirk Nowitzki, and he said, he did a commercial, guess what day it is? It's game day. And so we extended that really successful campaign into guess what day it is? It's North Texas Giving Day. And we actually brought a live camel into the Mavericks offices and had Chandler Parsons and Devin Harris ride a live camel screaming, guess what day it is? It's North Texas Giving Day. Give to the Mavs Foundation. And so that was just fun because, I mean, where else can you bring a live camel into your office and have a professional athlete ride it and be on, you know, on camera doing it. So it was for a good cause. I just think, you know, at the end of the day, we have fans, and fans get very passionate and very sometimes aggressive on, you know, their wishes for their teams to do well. And so it's really fun when we can remind people that we are in the entertainment business, and it is lighthearted and it is fun, and we have good guys, and it's a cool platform to promote the right things. So that campaign was really enjoyable to just be on the more lighthearted community side of things.
Right. That's cool. That's a good marketing story. And I also think it kind of represents why people want to get into sports marketing. It's such a, you know, it's kind of an aspirational thing for a lot of marketing students. And I want to be respectful of your time here, but I want to get into one more thing. And you touched on it with your last answer, but I'm teaching courses in integrated marketing programs, and you know how marketing, usually it's its own department, but then there are all these kind of sub-segments of what marketing is all about. Mm-hmm. And of course, with modern marketing, it's really important for, you know, brand consistency and messaging to have integration of all these different arms of the marketing department. So can you tell us a little bit about how your sales promotion, your advertising, your PR, your direct selling, any personal selling you do for suites or something like that, and your digital social presence, how are these all tied together? Are you the person that's managing that integration? What are kind of the challenges and successes that you've seen with integrated marketing?
Yeah, I think, well, first, yes, I am the person here within our organization that tries to pull them all together. So I work very closely with our ticket sales and service memberships team. I work very closely with our corporate partnerships team. And then obviously I fall within the marketing and communications department. So it's definitely interesting because the landscape, as you just described, has changed so much, even in my short career, especially with everything, you know, pushing toward digital. It used to be that social media was its own kind of brand on behalf of your company. And then you had traditional marketing, and then you had traditional communications and PR. And then you had, traditional sales that was much more face-to-face or over the phone. And now all of these things have really, digital has taken over in every area. So it's tough to blend things that have stood alone for the longest time. But from our standpoint, it's just very important that we hone in on what our goals are as a company. So our goals as a company are to build the Dynamo and the Dash brand and interest in the sport of soccer, but specifically with the Houston teams. So our men's team, the Dynamo, and our women's team, the Dash. And then the game through our international events coming through the state BBVA Compass Stadium. That's our primary goal, is just to build our fan base and get people interested in the first place. And then beyond that, as I've alluded to, it's getting people to a game. So obviously that's the sales component to it. We can have all the fans in the world, but we need them to show up and fill the building. And then the last part is to connect with our community. And so it's very important for us that we are, community minded and that we're a pillar within Houston. So I think that's where we just really strive to tie everything back in together and amplify the same messages, the same calls to action, the same things that we're looking for from our fan base. So, the most successful campaigns that we've had internally are the ones where we're launching something as a company, and it's not marketing's doing this and sales has started this and corporate partnerships is over here. But it is in any industry, not just the sports world, getting tougher and tougher to stay consistent because there are so many channels and there are so many business goals. And so I think it's just really important that you understand what that overarching strategy is and you preach that time and time again to every staff member. And I'm personally a fan of taking different jobs so you can understand someone's role in a different area. So for me personally, one of the things that I strive to do as a marketer is take a position that has some elements that I'm very strong in and some that I need to learn more about. And that would be my advice for any student, is to, you're never going to be 100% comfortable in a position. And if you are, you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough. But, we can't have a social media coordinator that thinks their only job is to post on social media. They need to also understand how they're helping drive ticket sales or how they're helping to tell the story about what we're doing in the community. And we can't have a ticket salesperson who thinks they're only here to sell tickets. They need to understand how they're representing our brand and how they're, contributing to the overall fan base that we're trying to generate. So I think it's my job to help from a strategic planning and how we buy our media and how we roll things out and when and where and to whom. But it's every employee's responsibility to understand how they, how their puzzle piece fits into the bigger picture.
Right. That's great advice. And I love that answer. I think, I kept thinking back to your Paint It Black campaign when you're talking about integrated marketing, because on its face, it doesn't feel like a digital or, social activity, but you can just imagine all the people that were being photographed in front of the mural. And it's just, you're kind of deliberately building in these links between the different arms of marketing, which is really what marketing is becoming, is kind of, starting with your target market, but also with your creative and your message generation, figuring out, what is going to have these links built into it so that it's not really hard for us to maintain consistency and shareability and all these things that we value across the different aspects of marketing and PR.
Exactly.
So awesome. All right, Lexie, I'm gonna let you off the hook. I've eaten up a lot of your time, but I think it flowed naturally, and you had great stories, and I think your advice to students is going to be very well received. So thank you for spending time with me to chat through marketing for the Dynamo. We'll look forward to the rest of your work there, and then whichever NHL team you end up with in the future. So thank you very much.